the roster for spring ball basically set, let's hand out some grades on the offensive side of the ball.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes for Inside the Huskies and Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So, Lars, we're going to have a little bit of fun today. You know, there's still a whole bunch of time until spring ball gets underway. We're starting to get into the under a month now. The calendar was officially released with no times on Monday night. So it's nice to start to see, oh yeah, spring football is kind of creeping up on us. So before we get there though, we're going to hand out some grades now on both sides of the ball because this is basically what the spring roster is going to be, despite any late graduate transfer additions, which we might see getting a little bit closer to the actual practice itself. But we got some time before now and then. So we're going to start with the quarterback position, and we're going to do this. We're going to give out two grades. We're going to start by giving out a 2024 grade for the position. And then at the end of the segment, we're both going to give a grade based on the future of the position. And it'll just be A through F, plus, minus, it's all applicable. So I'm going to hand it off to you to start with your 2024 grade for the quarterback position.
So I'm going to say, and again, part of me wants to be realistic. Part of me also, as you were saying this, I didn't register what your shirt said. So there's kind of the ironic feeling about this. I don't feel that way about this, but I do, again, there's some iffy positions. But to that point, sure. I'm going to say B minus because Will Rogers probably is a B or B plus quarterback, but coming off an injury season, only played 6 games. Again, has plenty of history, right? One of the most, I think, top 3 or top 2 quarterbacks in passing yards in college football actively right now. So no question about it. You have an experienced quarterback. That's why it's a B, but it's a B minus because of the injury history, the kind of injury question. I still expect Will Rogers to be the starter, at least against Weber State. But with that being said, I can't say this is an A plus, you're going from Heisman to a Heisman, but there's not that much of a drop off, but there is enough of a drop off to say it's a B minus for me.
So I like where we're going there. I had a solid B where I liked his fit in Jedd Fisch's system. I think that he's going to throw the ball around really well, where I still have some questions. We'll get to the receivers as well, because that's where the majority of my questions lie when it comes to this grade. But I wanted to go with a B because I like everything that he can do, especially if he's fully healthy. And then the other reason I wanted to go with a B, where we look at the position as a whole for this season, if he does go down, I really like the upside. But there are still a lot of questions there, obviously, since they're both guys behind him are true freshmen in Demond Williams and DeMarcius Davis. So while both those guys are super talented, you like their upside, and we'll get into, obviously, a grade for moving forward. But when you just look at if Will Rogers goes down, which obviously is not something we want to happen, but if that were to happen, you'd like the upside. You could say, all right, yeah, there are going to be a lot of things here to work with. But at the same time, you're not going to feel great about that, and you're going to have a lot of questions about that moving forward.
Right, and which to me, I think I wonder, and the other part of it, again, because again, right now we're looking at just Will Rogers, but I have to wonder, do you think they go and get a 4th quarterback just as a mid-year, just as a JUCO mid-year? Because to your point, that's why I have it as a B minus in terms of for Will Rogers is fine. But when you go to 2 true freshman quarterbacks, it's not like there's that much of a – I mean, again, Demond Williams, I think, will be fine. DeMarcius Davis will be fine long term, which is why, again, when I get to those grades, I'll be probably in the same range. But right now, I would put them at like a D just because they're freshmen, right? It's like, hey, like you could get to a C, you can get us to a passing grade, which is a win, right? A C is basically a win, right? You're maybe 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions coming in on mop-up duty or whatever. But for me, that's when you also pair in the other problems, the other grades of other positions. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Will Rogers is good, right? That's why it's a B. But if Will goes down, now are you as confident in that offense being executed at the same high level? I think probably a year from now with Demond Williams, sure, right? Like a year in the system, but DeMarcius Davis, same thing. But this the 2024, I don't know how I would feel about that.
So I certainly agree with you on that point, but in terms of just what Jedd Fisch's philosophy about a lot of this is, when you just look at what he has said about playing young guys and saying, we're willing to let that happen, we're willing to take those lumps, I think that that's where I come to a B, because I look at that and I see, okay, if he's comfortable throwing these guys out there as true freshmen, I think that, obviously there's still a lot of things that we haven't seen. We're grading this without having watched them take a single snap at spring practice. But when you think about what his philosophy is and what Jedd Fisch wants from a lot of these things, if he's comfortable enough to say, all right, I just from the way that he's attacked, the transfer portal so far, what he was able to utilize, and just where he has addressed needs so far, it seems like he'd be comfortable doing that, because look at what happened with Noah Fifita. And I'm not comparing Damon Williams to Noah Fifita or DeMarcus Davis, but if he were not very confident in Jayden de Laura going into last season, wouldn't he have done something similar? Gone out and, and for a name Husky fans might know, a Patrick O'Brien, for lack of a better term. Would he go out and have gotten a Patrick O'Brien or a Kevin Thompson, where it's a guy who, this guy's solid. This guy can take some reps if need be. And he'd be more of a stopgap than he would anything else to the future. No, he's saying, all right, I'm comfortable rolling with these kinds of guys. So he has enough confidence to go out there and let them make a play and let them do what they will. So that's where I come to a B, because I think that some of it has to involve what Jedd Fisch's philosophy is on the whole process of playing freshmen and playing young guys. And yeah, quarterback is kind of the one outlier in that sense. And, and especially if you want to look at Austin Mack and where he might have been, if you want to factor what he could have been into this conversation as well. But I just think that what Jedd Fisch wants and what he seems to have in these guys, a B is just kind of where I'm going to land no matter what.
That's fair, because I think when you look at both of them, again, to your point, we haven't seen them take a snap in college or even a college practice snap. But sure. I think maybe this once we see them and see, okay, if they're able just to kind of keep up with the pace of the offense in spring camp, then maybe my questions go away where, okay, if Will goes down, which again, you don't want Will to go down, but if he does, okay, there's maybe more faith in these guys being able to run it, or vice versa, right? If we look in spring ball and they say, and they're just, missing, almost like what Austin Mack looked like last spring, where it's like, hey, we see the upside, right? We see the potential, but also like, the guy's going to take 25 or 30 sacks based on the way he's holding the ball for 5 seconds. So it's right. And again, but it's as a freshman, that's kind of a normal thing, right? You're still trying to get used to the pace of college football, even in practice. So that's why for me, again, Jedd can say, hey, I want to play a bunch of freshmen, which he showed that at Arizona.
Yeah.
But let's see what that looks like at Washington, right? Let's see after he gets through spring ball, how motivated is he to say, hey, you know what? We can roll with these guys as freshmen. Or it's like, yeah, I'm still not opposed to playing freshmen, but it's good to have some kind of stopgap just in case the freshmen aren't exactly ready, because I'd rather not win, 4 games in my first year at Washington, sort of thing.
So with that being said, what's your long-term grade at the quarterback position?
Long-term grade is B+, because of that upside, and because I think, again, to my other point of, if you can get the offensive line and get the receivers, I think are okay long-term. I think if you can get the offensive line long-term kind of just stabled out, which I think it will be. I'm just saying, how to just maybe get a couple more bodies in there, make it a little more reassuring. I think the position overall is a B+.
So I like where you're going there. I gave it an A- moving forward, just because I think both these guys have such a high ceiling, and that's why I didn't want to go full A or an A+, because you never know what's going to happen. But you look at the potential that's in the room right now, and you can't help but be excited about what that's going to look like moving forward. So with that being said, let's get into some other positions. Let's get into skill guys. Right after a message from our friends over at Game Time, because you shouldn't have to worry about when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Some of the coolest things about Game Time are the last-minute tickets, the flash deals, the zone deals. There are all kinds of deals on the Game Time app, and you can get a view from every single seat in the venue, so you know exactly what to expect. But when you arrive, all-in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps, because Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. So, Lars, let's start with the running backs, where we'll split this up. We'll go running backs in the first half, receivers in the second half. And what's your outlook or what's your grade for the running backs in 2024?
This is where I would have an A-, because when you look at what you're bringing back, right? First of all, you're bringing in Jonah Coleman, right? So again, that does count, right? Because we're not just saying look at just the guys who were here last year, right?
Yep.
But then you lose Dylan Johnson, but you bring in Jonah Coleman, which I think is, we love Dylan, but I think that's it's even more of an upgrade than I think what initially it could look at just based on the numbers.
I think it's a slight upgrade. I wouldn't go with massive, but there definitely is a bit of an upgrade there.
But I was gonna say, that wasn't a slight to Dylan, because I think
not
we talked about on yesterday's show, like he can do a lot. So I think it's almost like a younger version of Dylan. Is probably that's why I'm saying like a little bit more maybe potential long term. But then you also have Tyler Rogers and Cameron Davis returning, right? Cameron Davis has scored 10 plus touchdowns multiple in at least one season, I think in 2022 or
2022 he did, yeah.
Yeah. And so pairing him with Jonah Coleman and Tyler Rogers, and then you still have Daniel Ngata, who again the enigma, but again could turn out to be actually pretty well in this system, which I think actually he might honestly work better in Jedd's system than he would have in Kalen and Ryan Grubb's system. That's just because of how they use the offense and use the skill players and things like that. So I think that's why for me this is an A-, because there's so much. This is why I go B- on the quarterback, because it's an A- running back group, right? You have so many more running backs that Will Rogers doesn't have to be an A+ quarterback or even an A quarterback. You can just be a B quarterback and manage it and use your skill guys. And so I think I'm really intrigued to see how well these guys just are used in many different facets, not just running the ball, but in all facets of the game.
So I've got an A here because I think this is going to be one of the best running back combos in the Big Ten between Jonah Coleman and Cameron Davis, because it's probably going to be a split. We're going to see, we're not sure if it's going to be, a direct 50-50, but both those guys are going to need a lot of work. And then the rest of them are just going to kind of fill in with where need be, which is what would have been the case in 2023 if Cameron Davis hadn't gotten hurt. So this is kind of just like you said, it's a slight upgrade. It's not a massive upgrade because Dylan was excellent in so many ways. I think that Dylan was a little bit better of a pass protector than Jonah Coleman is, but with what Jonah Coleman does with the ball in his hands, just how shifty he is, he's really fun to watch. I think that he's going to make a big impact on this offense. And behind those two guys, we'll get into just kind of the future of the position now. I've got a B-, C+ somewhere in that range where there's a lot of potential. I really like Adam Muhammad, the true freshman from Apollo. I think that he's got some juice. I think he's a fun player to watch on film. And, outside of that, we'd like to see Tybo Rogers step up into a bigger role. We'd see what that looks like. I have some questions, about his tackle breaking and if he can add some more weight and do a couple of things. Because we saw him look really nice at times this past year, but there's still some questions there. And then there's just questions with some of the other guys, right? Sam Adams, Will Nixon, Daniel Ngata, where there's talent, there's upside, but we just haven't seen it yet. So I'm curious to see how that all would shape out.
Yeah, see, like that's why for me in terms of long term, I really don't want to be this harsh, but I want to say a C because it's passing because you have enough bodies.
That's fair.
It's passing because you have enough bodies and there's enough potential talent in that room. But it's because to your point, it's so unproven. I can't go one way or the other. I can't go C+, D-, or you're just D+, whatever, because it's not a D, right? There's enough talent to make it C in passing, but there isn't a long-term Jonah Coleman. There isn't a long-term, Cam Davis. Or at least from my eyes right now. I could be wrong. Tybo maybe emerges or whatever. But then you get to Sam Adams, where whether he stays healthy or doesn't, he hasn't found a consistent role in this team. Then you go to Daniel Ngata, who came in as a transfer from Arizona State and then basically just kicked return last year and didn't really do much else besides that. And then you add the other one that I'm missing, Will Nixon, right? Will Nixon still on the roster, I believe, right? That's correct. Yeah. And so there's a number of guys like that where you just kind of look and say, like, okay, I like what you might bring, but it's almost like if you have 5 running backs, you have none sort of thing. Like if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have 1 maybe or none. But it's like to me, that I don't see a true, like, I mean, again, Adam Muhammad is nice, right? But because we haven't seen him in college, look at the amount of running backs that have come in over the years, Mecca Megwa. I know it's a terrible example currently, but just, like all these guys that are coming, like, hey, like, he looks like he's gonna be really nice. He looks like he's gonna be a big addition. And then it just for one reason or another doesn't pan out. So
Sure.
I like Adam Muhammad, right? I think but you need more than Adam Muhammad moving forward. And obviously you have more than Adam Muhammad. But right now, in terms of if you just penciled in Tybo and Adam Muhammad, is that going to win you more than 5 games? Probably not.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's where the 2025 class gets interesting with all that. But let's move on to receivers. What grade did you give the receivers for 2024?
Well, I'm going to go with a solid B because I like
Yeah,
the experience. I like the combination of experience, size, versatility, all that. You got Giles Jackson and doing Giles Jackson things because he can do a number of different things. You got Denzel Boston, Jeremiah Hunter. You maybe go get one more receiver in the spring portal. Maybe not. You don't have to, but it wouldn't hurt. And then you got a bunch of young guys, which again, for me, that might be where the higher long-term grade comes into when it's B plus A minus, just because of all those guys' talent. I'm talking about that's Keith Reynolds, Rashid Williams,
Justice Williams.
Williams. Yeah, I was gonna say I knew there's so many Williams on the team now, but the long term honestly kind of might be actually not might be. I think it will be better, but the younger players won't play like they will play this year. But I mean, you still want Giles Jackson, Jeremiah Hunter, and Denzel to be your still leading trio. But you want to make sure those younger guys like almost like what Rome and those guys were in 21, right? We're like, hey, you're a freshman or sophomore, you're coming along. Wait till you get to your junior year, and then you're going to explode like that. Yeah. That is kind of the trajectory I have for this receiver room.
So I like where you're going with there because I have a B as well, and it's exactly what I said because Jeremiah Hunter can be that 1A. You like Giles Jackson's experience. You think that he's going to be able to do some nice things this year. Denzel Boston is somebody you and I are both really high on. I wrote about him a little bit over on Huskies Wire, and you look at the trajectory he's on, where it's not necessarily that same one that Rome was, where obviously Rome by his second year was in the mix a little bit more, but it's a similar path. He's got similar measurables. He's just a really good athlete. And sitting behind the 4 guys that he was, if you want to throw Jeremy Bernard into that mix as well, it's not easy for anybody to get on the field, no matter how good they are. Yeah. So that's another guy where you can definitely see him stepping into a much bigger role this year. And then, yeah, behind him, you're right. The long term, because I was like, all right, I want to be set on a B plus where I really like this potential, but the more I think about it, the more I'm at an A minus for the long term just outlook at receivers. And part of that is credit to Kevin Cummings, where I think he's a fantastic developer. I think he's going to do a really good job with these guys. But then it's the guys you mentioned, right? It's Rashid Williams. It's Keith Reynolds. It's Jason Robinson. It's Justice Williams. It's all these guys that are sitting around in the room right now where you look at them and you say, yeah, these are a bunch of really, really high ceiling guys. And then you look at what this 2025 class might hold if they can go get Phillip Bell, if they can pull in Cooper Perry, insert XY 4-star receiver from California, Arizona, wherever it might be. There are a whole bunch of other guys that you can add to this class and say, yeah, that would make sense too, and just kind of push it even higher moving forward. But there's so much potential there, and there's so much to be excited about from the film that we've seen and again, it's still all unproven. So that's what kind of keeps me from an A, but it's still exciting to think about a lot of those guys that are at that position right now.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's not just a long-term thing of like, hey, like we have great freshmen and redshirt freshmen. We don't have anybody that's a sophomore, junior, or senior, right? It's like, okay, well, then you're either playing all those guys and taking your lumps now. And that's why getting Jeremiah Hunter was so big. That's why getting Giles Jackson back was so big, because we all knew you were going to lose your trio, right? I mean, even though we wanted J-Mac or Poe to come back, it's like we knew all 3 of those guys were going to go, and they validated that at the combine. So now it's like, okay, once you lose Jeremy Bernard to Alabama, okay, that's one. Okay, fine. But you got to keep Denzel, and then you got to bring some other guys in. So I think that's why the versatility in this room is what I'm curious to see how Kevin Cummings can take advantage of it.
Right. And I just, the more I think about this too, I I'm really excited just about the freshmen that are in the room as well. When you look at Justice Williams and Jason Robinson, two guys who decided to hold over from Kalen DeBoer's recruiting class, and they're both really promising guys. We're really excited about what they would look like with Jamarcus Shepard, and that's one of the nice things where you and I have talked about Kevin Cummings for a couple of weeks now on the show, and whenever you think about him and what he's been able to do during his time at Arizona, he could certainly do that with these guys at Washington too. And there's just so much alike. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think that's kind of the reassuring thing is we saw him do it. We saw all these guys do this at Arizona, right? Go from 1-11 to 10-3. So I think knowing that you're going to have better resources at Washington, probably better talent coming in, at least in some positions, not every position, obviously, but some positions, that's where that growth gap has to be closed even more at Washington because you're going to the Big Ten. You're not just at Arizona where you can have a couple years to rebuild. It's like, hey, we just came from a national championship. We can't fall off that much.
Right. With that being said, let's get on to the tight ends on the offensive line. Right after a message from our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So let's start with the tight ends because the offensive line is probably going to take up the majority of the conversation. So we'll start with the tight ends now. And I feel like I have to be kind of harsh here. And I want to go with C- because not only is and we'll get to the long term, but in the short term, there are a lot of questions in the position where Quentin Moore has been a blocker for the majority of his career. Ryan Otten hasn't seen the field very much, mainly due to injuries and a couple other factors. And then there's two true freshmen in Decker DeGraff and Charlie Kroll, where we'll get to those guys more in the long term. But there are a lot of questions here, and there are way more questions than there are answers, because who knows what that's going to look like? Is Quentin Moore going to be able to take a step up and look like, not Tanner McLaughlin, but he got released from the Seahawks as we're recording this on Tuesday, Will Dissly. Could he fill a Will Dissly role? I don't even know if he can do that yet. Whereas he learned the offense, I think that's very possible, but we just haven't seen it, so we can't just say, yes, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, not to double down on the harshness, but I would say D, just being real. I'd say it's not an F, right? It's not an F, but
no,
you have a bunch of blockers and freshmen, and that's kind of it. Like we saw Quentin Moore catch one catch for a couple of yards when he had the touchdown against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah.
That's it. Now, again, very important play, right? Not discrediting Quentin Moore at all, but Quentin Moore's always been known more as a blocker, right? It's kind of that third option, that maybe kind of hybrid tight end, if you will.
And no, you're right. But again, it's not saying that they can't do this. Right. We're not saying that at all. It's we haven't seen it yet, and we can't, because when we can look at the receivers and we can look at some of the recruiting rankings, which is not always a great factor, but we can look at what we saw from Denzel Boston last fall. We can look at what we saw from Jeremiah Hunter-Cal and say, yeah, they haven't done that on the big stage yet either here. But there's a little bit more to go on compared to what we've seen from this tight ends group.
Right, exactly. And so I think knowing that how Jedd's going to want to run this offense, you're going to need something else in that room. I mean, even if Decker DeGraff and Charlie Kroll, end up emerging or even playing a factor in any role, or even if Ryan Otten does, it's just like you just look at that room and say, you need a Ben Urosic, you need somebody, you need something that comes in and just says, hey, you know what? I will take care of this. You guys take care of that.
Right. And with that being said, the long term, I'm not much higher on it right now. I'm at a C+, where I think that Charlie Kroll and Decker DeGraff are two nice ads. I think they're both going to be decent players moving forward. But it's that same thing where I think that their skill sets are going to complement each other very nicely. But I want to see a little bit more from them as we get into spring practice before I can move that up to any higher at this point.
Yeah, and I would just say a C just because, again, it's passing because you got two different tight ends in Decker DeGraff and Charlie Kroll, where one's more of a passer, pass catcher, one's more of a blocker. So that's good enough to kind of check the basic tight end box. But again, in terms of actual impact, long term, and depth, I mean, they don't have it. They just flat out don't have it. Now, again, they kind of inherited that situation. So that's why the spring portal period is going to be important to add a couple more bodies to that room. But yeah, I mean, I can't go above a C just because, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's passing. You got a couple guys, but other than that, I don't even know.
Where are you at on the offensive line?
The offensive line, this year,
it's tough.
Right. Yeah, right now, I'm going to say C minus just because, again, there's like, again, for the Drew Azzopardi, for the XY, for, you know, again, Drew Azzopardi is basically the only one I can name that's got some experience because Landen's hurt.
Yeah,
guard didn't play last year, but so again, those, if you had
guard's going to miss the spring too, so he's still hurt. Yeah,
right. And so if you had all three of those guys healthy, that's automatically, it's probably a C plus, maybe B minus. And so
sure,
there's just so many other questions. Now, again, I look at the long term, I look at the redshirt freshmen, some of the guys that they brought in. I'd probably say B minus just because, again, still need to get moving forward, B minus. Still need to get some more guys in that room. But again, it's C minus currently, B minus long term. You really want to get that to a C plus, B minus for this year, and then a B plus, A minus moving into the future. And both of those are going to come with, can you coach up the young guys? You know, Elijah Jaquette, there's plenty of talent, young talent in that room, but there's no true immediate, hey, these are the guys that are filling these roles for 2024. So, that's the problem that I have.
So I hear where you are. So for me, like I said, I'm at a C minus right now, but I'm at a B minus moving forward. And I'll start with right now because it's everything you just named, right? It's Drew Azzopardi is the only guy that you can look at right now and say, okay, that guy is going to start. Where I think guard's going to start by the time we get through the fall, but he's not going to practice this spring. So who knows? And then that still leaves 3 open positions because we'll see where Landen's at in terms of his rehab from his injury. But that's a guy you might not want to play this year, and you might want to just let him redshirt, maybe get him a couple games here and there. But you want to be really careful with that injury, especially because, you know, he was so young anyways and forced into action as a true freshman just through everything that 2023 was along the interior of the offensive line. And then you can look at the other guys. Does a Kalen DeBoer step up? That'd be really nice. Does an Elijah Jaquette step up? Do you go to the transfer portal and get a Branson Hickman or get a Chad Lindbergh, some of these guys that we've talked about over the last week or two? So if you go get, let's just say they get both those guys, then this is a B. It's a solid B. And, you know, that's potential to be more moving forward if they're able to show that they can do what they did at the previous schools. And then, you know, for you and I differ a little bit on the long term right now, because the long term I'm at a B minus. And I just like a lot of the potential that's there because a couple of guys you didn't mention, Paki Finau, Justin Hilkema, I really like what they can do a lot. And then you combine that with Kalen DeBoer, Sione Fasolo, and Elijah Jaquette, and that's a really solid group where obviously we don't know if that's going to be the starting 5, especially when you look at, you know, Jake Flores in the 2025 class. We like him a lot. We'll see what he looks like when he's able to get on campus. But I think that there's a lot of potential among that group. And I've been really impressed with what Brennan Carroll is able to do. And it kind of comes back to something that I was saying at the beginning of the show when I was talking about Damon Williams is the staff is not afraid to play those young guys. And along the offensive line, we've just seen so much from Brennan Carroll already and what that line was able to do at Arizona. And I like the talent that's there. And we know that they're so far away from what it's probably going to look like moving forward, especially that I think there's a little bit more reason for optimism there. And it's not, you know, discrediting, just say Jordan Powell, where we're a little bit lower on tight end moving forward, but it's just the offensive line. I feel there are a little bit more ways to just kind of build that up and make that look passable at the very worst. Whereas with tight end, you know, sometimes that position can disappear from just what a modern offense is.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Like I think we're both believing long term. I think it's just a matter of can you get the pieces in 24 to make
Yeah.
the line serviceable, because that's where all this ties together. Where if Will Rogers becomes a C+ quarterback because he has a D offensive line, they got problems, right? It's like if you're going to bring in and keep Will Rogers, you got to at least put some protection around him just to make him be able to play point guard, right? Because that's all he's got to do is just have 2.5 seconds. Like, all he really needs is 2.5 seconds. So if you can't get that, we got problems. But I think they'll be able to find some options in the portal. So,
and that's what I was going to say. Where you have to believe that, because that's something Jedd Fisch has already talked about, saying we know that there are positions we need to address in the transfer portal when that opens up in the spring. And yeah, we keep harping on it, but it hasn't opened up yet. So that's all we can say right now until we see just all the bodies that are going to be in there and what they're able to do with some of those positions. But you like what it looks like. And you've seen just some success from that. You like what Brennan Carroll's been able to do during his time at Arizona. And you can just look at all that. Look at the body of work. Look at where it is right now. Look at the ability to retain Paki Finau and a couple of other things and just say, yeah, long term, you can definitely get on board with being comfortable with where that is right now.
Exactly. I think that's again, keeping all those younger guys, I think was kind of the key in all of this. Where if you lost Paki, or if you lost Landen, or if you lost so-and-so, then it makes it a lot more of an uphill battle where I can sell this belief long term. I can't sell it without those guys.
Absolutely. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support, and please stay tuned because we got some really special guests coming your way very soon. We just got to work out some scheduling things here and there, and I think you're going to like some of the guests that we've got coming up. So please make sure that you stay subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day, so please make sure you like the channel, like the video, leave us a comment down below, everything. Leave us a 5-star review because it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Thursday.